any contractor see any change in their flight readiness?
No.
Okay. I know everybody's a little frustrated. It's our fourth scrub in the last month. But let's work on a quick turnaround, huh?
The process by which we reach decisions in groups and organizations has been the subject of scrutiny for decades.
Let's schedule launch for 0938 tomorrow morning.
This has led to increasingly complex procedures in an attempt to guarantee the success of group decisions, in keeping with the growing complexity of our goals and our technology.
24-hour turnaround. Go with a soft count. Right, Gene. 4, 3, 2, and... There it goes, folks. The countdown has begun.
Nevertheless, decision-making itself remains a very human activity, and therefore subject to human error. The tragedy of the Challenger accident and many other catastrophic events can be traced in part to the group decision-making process that leads to them. Among the causes of faulty group decisions, few have received more attention or study than in GroupThink. Simply stated, GroupThink is a mode of thinking in which group members' premature striving for agreement somehow overrides their ability to realistically appraise alternative courses of action. When and why does this groupthink occur? Ironically, it may stem from the very bonds that draw us together into groups in the first place. In the early 70s, renowned psychologist Dr. Irving Janis first identified groupthink and theorized it could be brought on by something he called group cohesiveness.
Well, basically, a cohesive group is one whose members are very positive in their feeling toward the group and are very strongly motivated to retain their membership in the group. Now, you can look at the executive committees, work groups of various types, friendship cliques, athletic teams. All of these show characteristic signs of group cohesiveness. See very strong esprit de corps, strong feelings of solidarity, sense of we feeling that pervades the group. And it has a very profound effect on their morale and on their readiness to carry out the tasks of the group, and above all, to live up to the norms of the group. One of the consequences of high cohesiveness is a tendency for the members of the group to strive toward agreement. And this is a concurrence-seeking tendency that is at the core of groupthink.
Since Dr. Janis first developed the groupthink hypothesis, psychologists have discovered a number of additional factors that can predispose group members to engage in groupthink. A highly insulated group with restrained access to outside ideas, a stressful decision-making context, such as that brought on by budgetary restraints, external pressure, or a history of recent setbacks. Isolation, stress, budgetary pressures, factors we all commonly face in a wide variety of decision-making situations. But how do the dynamics of groupthink actually originate? And how can we avoid becoming victims of groupthink in our own organizations? To answer this, we first need to take an in-depth look at the group interactions that can lead up to an unsuccessful group decision.
Come on over. I hear you've had a couple of new thoughts.
Yes, I do. I wrote a memo to Bob Lund about it.
Well, what's the meat of it? Would you mind telling us?
Since Flight 17, we know something we didn't know before. The primary O-ring can fail completely. If that ever happens in one of the major sections of the rocket, it's a jump ball as to whether the joint holds or fails. If it fails, there'll be a catastrophe of the highest order. Loss of human life. The shuttle, the launch pad, all of it.
Roger, you're keyed up about the O-ring problem because O-rings is what you work on. It's what you see every day. Now, we got to fix this O-ring problem. There's no question about that. But, Roger, the shuttle has flown 19 times, and it's come back 19 times. Our job isn't to run around like Chicken Little hollering the sky is falling. It's to keep that shuttle flying.
everybody's hooked up.
Arnie Thompson and Roger Poingelet have been doing the research. They'll make the presentation.
The Air Force estimates 29 degrees at launch tomorrow morning.
We have no data on O-rings operating at temperatures this low.
So determining if this extreme cold will affect the O-rings, and if it does, how much is critical.
So our recommendation is, you should see it on the sheet coming through now, not launching until the temperature is at least 53 degrees.
Whoa. Oh. Wait a minute. Am I looking at the right charts? Charts I've got don't support that conclusion.
They do. I think they do.
Well, you began by saying what you're presenting can't be proved. And I agree, it can't. But now you're drawing serious conclusions from it, and you're making very serious recommendations.
Serious recommendations are called for.
Well, of course, that's why we're here. But what you're saying sounds like Morton Thiokol is establishing new launch commit criteria the night before a launch. Now, these solid rocket boosters have been operating under very definite specifications. You suddenly want to change them. You now want to base everything on this 53-degree benchmark. At that rate, it could be spring before the shuttle would fly. My God, Thiokol, when do you want me to launch? Next April?
I don't think we want to change launch commit criteria. We're trying to see if it's safe to launch with the O-rings experiencing these severe temperatures.
All right, I'm looking at your chart on Flight 15. There was erosion. But the worst erosion we've ever had was on Flight 2, and the temperature outside was 70 degrees. Now, where in what you're presenting is the correlation between low temperature and erosion? Your charts even seem to support the opposite.
All I'm saying is that launching it below freezing is an act away from goodness. All I'm saying is we should go by our experience base, as limited as that is. And our experience base says that at 53 degrees or less, we can expect increased erosion and blow-by.
Roger, it's my understanding that the solid rocket boosters are qualified by contract for operation between 40 and 90 degrees. This 53-degree specification would be setting a new benchmark. Are the solids qualified at 40 degrees or aren't they?
It's away from goodness to make any other recommendation.
Listen. If being in the direction of goodness means wanting a successful result for this mission, I want that result. Everybody involved in this telecon wants it. Be reassured, Roger, you are not in the direction of goodness by yourself. But we've got an engineering decision to make here. And it's got to be made on quantifiable data. Now, Well, I want to ask Joe Kilminster for his recommendation.
Based on this presentation by our engineers here at Morton Thiokol, I can't recommend a launch.
I think we should get George Hardy's comments.
Well, let me ask first, does Thiokol have any more to transmit? Any further views? Because if not, I'm appalled that they could arrive at the recommendation not to launch, given the data that's been presented, especially so late on the evening before a launch. I agree with Larry Malloy. I make the same assessment he does. But if Thiokol recommends not launching, I'm certainly not going to override it.
We'd like to go offline for 5 minutes here and have a conference.
All right.
I want to make sure I've got this. The worry is that temperatures in the 20s or 30s could cause the primary O-ring to seal more slowly. If it did, we could get some blow-by.
That's right.
But don't we have some tests that show how the O-rings
We have
behave?
tests showing that even if the blow-by cut 125 thousandths of an inch out of the O-ring, it would still seal.
I'll tell you, it makes an impression on me if George Hardy says he's appalled at something we recommend.
His point is, and I think you have to listen to it, is that even if you get blow-by of the primary O-ring, the secondary O-ring is still in the proper position to seal.
Our charts may be inconclusive, our data insufficient, but everything we do have shows we'll be safer launching at 53 degrees or above.
That's clear. That's absolutely clear.
It's time to make a decision. Bob, take off your engineer's hat and put on your management hat.
You're right about that.
This is Joe Kilminster. We've assessed the data and reviewed all our charts. Even though we had some concerns about the low temperatures, we now recommend proceeding with the launch.
Does anyone in the loop have a different position?
Was GroupThink responsible in part for the decision to launch Challenger? And what part does GroupThink play in the numerous group decisions each of us faces every day in our personal and organizational lives? Dr. James K. Esser is among a number of researchers studying modern organizational decision-making, including the effects of GroupThink.
In 1972, Dr. Janus identified 8 symptoms of groupthink, which have since been examined in a number of laboratory and case studies. When more of these symptoms are present, the likelihood is greater that groupthink has occurred, and therefore the probability is higher that any resulting decision will be unsuccessful, possibly even catastrophic.
The first symptom occurs when group members develop an illusion of invulnerability.
Roger, it's my understanding that the solid rocket boosters are qualified by contract for operation between 40 and 90 degrees.
Members come to feel that the group is somehow immune from error, that procedural or technological backup systems will safeguard us from any negative outcome.
Even if you get blow-by of the primary O-ring, the secondary O-ring is still in the proper position to steal.
This illusion of invulnerability has played a key role in other historical decisions. Example, Pearl Harbor, December the 7th, 1941. Admiral Kimmel and his staff make a decision of their own to ignore repeated warnings from Washington that attack from Japan is imminent. The result? The destruction of the U.S. fleet and the loss of thousands of lives in what has been called the worst military disaster in American history. An exhaustive investigation reveals that Kimmel and his advisors apparently shared and acted upon an extreme sense of invulnerability right up until the end, as the first bombs began to explode.
This illusion of invulnerability is often linked with another illusion, that of the inherent morality of the group, the belief that whatever the group decides must be the ethical and proper choice.
Ironically, this belief in the inherent morality of the group may actually lead us to ignore very real ethical and moral consequences of a decision.
If being in the direction of goodness means wanting a successful result for this mission, I want that result. Everybody involved in this telecon wants it.
Such unquestioned faith in our own morality helps us protect something we will go to great lengths to defend: our self-esteem.
So far, we've looked at ways in which we overestimate the group itself, leading to faulty expectations of the consequences of group actions. But sometimes we also close our minds in groups, just when successful decision-making requires an open mind.
One way we may do this is through rationalization. For instance, focusing upon past success as a guarantee of future success.
But Roger, the shuttle has flown 19 times, and it's come back 19 times.
Such shared rationalizations perform a dangerous function. They allow us to downplay any information that conflicts with group opinions.
But don't we have some tests that show how the
We have tests showing that even if the blow-by cut 125 thousandths of an inch out of the O-ring, it would still seal.
Through rationalization, we close our minds to information available to us from within the group. However, we may also close our minds to ideas from outside the group through the use of negative stereotypes of outsiders.
The we feeling engendered by groupthink often generates a corresponding they feeling towards those outside the group.
Yet another costly red faces all around space shuttle launch delay. This time
the group may come to perceive, however mistakenly, that outsiders are overly critical of the group.
And the confidence in NASA's ability to maintain a launch schedule has been rocked.
Even that they are out to get them.
NASA admitted they goofed.
Ironically, through such stereotyping of outsiders, the group also becomes less receptive to valid criticism from legitimate sources. The result is further isolation.
So, closed-mindedness, fostered by the group, has enabled them to move towards a faulty consensus. All that is needed now is for the group to develop ways to reinforce conformity. One of these occurs when the group displays subtle and sometimes not so subtle forms of self-censorship.
Members may perceive such censorship as being imposed on them by the group itself. It isn't.
Does anyone in the loop have a different position?
Rather, it stems from the willingness to devalue our own individual ideas when they are in conflict with the known values of the group. Another historical example. In April of 1961, President Kennedy and his advisors make a decision to send a brigade of Cuban exiles to the Bay of Pigs. Their goal? The overthrow of Fidel Castro's communist government. The result was the greatest foreign policy fiasco of Kennedy's administration. Later, Arthur Schlesinger Jr. and others who had been party to the decision described their failure to express their own doubts about the decision. In effect, they had self-censored their own thoughts, at the same time depriving the group of vital input that might have prevented a disastrous course of action. But what about those situations where someone does speak out? In such cases, the group may apply direct pressure to members who appear to disagree.
Are the solids qualified at 40 degrees or aren't they?
Any deviation from the presumed group consensus may be met with scorn, even outright ridicule.
At that rate, it could be spring before the shuttle would fly. My God, Thiokol, when do you want me to launch? Next April?
Such direct pressure makes it clear that dissent or argument against the group consensus is somehow unacceptable, even disloyal.
I'm appalled that they could arrive at the recommendation not to launch, given the data that's been presented.
I'll tell you, it makes an impression on me if George Hardy says he's appalled at something we recommend.
One of the most interesting ways in which group members are pressured into uniformity is by the presence of what are called mind guards. Just as a bodyguard protects our bodies from physical damage, a mind guard protects the group from exposure to ideas that might threaten group assumptions.
This happens in a number of ways. For instance, the discouraging of others from expressing their true doubts or beliefs.
Our job isn't to run around like Chicken Little hollering the sky is falling.
Or in some cases, even by the suppression of documents or other information, in effect, preserving the group's shared complacency.
I wrote a memo to Bob Lund about it.
The memo in question, stamped company private. NASA decision makers never saw it.
By self-censoring doubts, through direct pressure, and through mind guards, the group is able to maintain its false unity. This can lead to what may be the most disturbing symptom of all, the illusion of unanimity.
Those who may have spoken out are subtly reminded that the group norm is one of agreement, not discord.
Be reassured, Roger, you are not in the direction of goodness by yourself.
Any threat to the atmosphere of agreement is discounted.
I don't think we want to change launch commit criteria.
Members are encouraged to get with the program and to move the group further ahead toward the decision.
Bob, take off your engineer's hat and put on your management hat.
The group's high regard for agreement has now overridden any realistic consideration of alternatives.
Even though we had some concerns about the low temperatures,
We now recommend proceeding with the launch.
Our group somehow preordained to develop GroupThink and therefore to suffer the consequences of faulty decision-making? Not necessarily. Research suggests that the leader can initiate and lead groups in ways which can foster a positive decision-making climate.
Only a year and a half after the fiasco at Bay of Pigs, Kennedy and the same advisors were faced with another potentially explosive crisis, the buildup of Soviet missiles in Cuba. Kennedy's handling of the situation illustrates several important strategies. First of all, in early meetings, the usual rules of protocol were suspended in favor of a more open and candid climate of discussion. Next, Kennedy took deliberate steps to avoid the insulation of the group. Adlai Stevenson, Dean Acheson, and others were brought in to provide critical reaction to the group's assumptions. Third, each individual member of the group was assigned the role of critical evaluator, charged with critiquing not just those areas about which they had special expertise, but the larger policy problems. Most of all, Kennedy avoided as much as possible being too directive. He was deliberately absent from some of the key meetings in order to avoid exerting undue influence upon the group. The outcome, a reasoned and thoughtful decision that was ultimately successful.
Now, it seems to me that the kinds of procedures that were used in that particular decision have potentially very wide applicability to preventing groupthink in many other situations, in many other kinds of groups.
One of the prime goals of the Challenger mission was educational. And though the mission ended in tragedy, it'd be doubly tragic if we were to neglect a vital lesson it holds for us.
Well, let's go home now.
No matter how sophisticated our technology, the successful attainment of our collective goals will always depend upon our individual courage to confront, to reason, and to make decisions together.
Night.
Nice rest, Larry.
Yeah.